Okay, good evening, everybody. This is it's so nice to see so many of you came out for this. This is the class of all the classes that I'm the most excited to teach, because to me, of all the things that we learning principles that you can really apply to your life and really change the way that you look at your daily experiences, that's the most powerful learning that we can do, because we really carry something with us from the words of Torah that we can use every day of our lives. So the Book of Mishle, what we're going to be doing over the next several weeks, we're going to have a series on the Book of Mishle. Now, to be able to cover the entire Book of Mishle would be a daunting task. It would be a wonderful thing to do, but it would be a challenge. But what I would like to do, and I think is reasonable for us to be able to accomplish, is to take some highlights from the Book of Mishle over the next several weeks. And then what we're going to hopefully hear from is from all of you guys, girls, ladies, what you would like to learn more about, what topics you would like there to be series about. This is just what I came up with because I needed to come up with something in advance before I got to know you. But now that we're all together and you have the opportunity, please let me know, or let whoever's in charge, the powers that be, know what subjects and topics you're interested in hearing about, so that we can make sure that the program is catering to your needs and your interests and is giving you what you hope to get out of this experience. But I really believe that what we're going to learn tonight is going to be something you're going to get as excited about as I am. Okay? So, we're going to look at the Book of Mishle. And the Book of Mishle is a book written by Shlomo HaMelech, written by King Solomon. And the objective of the book is to teach people how to live life wisely. It's the first self-help book. Okay? But it's a self-help book that comes from Ruach HaKodesh. It's a self-help book that comes from divine inspiration. That he didn't just sit down and decide to write whatever he thought, like the gurus of today, and have a best-selling book. But actually, these words of insight and practical wisdom are words that are coming from divine inspiration. So they're reliable and they're solid, and we can take these principles and see how they work in life. And that's what I find so amazing about the Book of Mishle. Now, one of the most basic things you need to know before we even start looking at the Book of Mishle is that the Book of Mishle has one assumption, one premise that runs throughout the entire book. And that one assumption and premise is that we are in a world that works according to chokhmah, works according to wisdom, it works according to intelligence. Hashem made it in such a way that if you understand and you think and you search, you will succeed. And if you're a fool, you won't succeed. And that's something that Mishle says again and again. The wise person succeeds and the fool doesn't succeed. Is it always true 100% of the time? There's always exceptions to every rule. Sometimes even the wise person, they say nice guys finish last. Sometimes even the wise person finishes last. That's what the Book of Kohelet is about. But we're not going to learn the Book of Kohelet right now. We're looking at the positive. Your best bet. Okay? It's possible that a person could never get out of bed, never do any work, never take any initiative, and through some good fortune end up being very successful. Just by luck. Could happen. However, 99% of the time, people who do that are not successful. And we know that. So Mishle is looking at the general rule. How can a person make it in life? And Shlomo HaMelech was known, the Navi tells us, in Sefer Melachim, was known for educating the people. He educated Bnei Israel in how to take the wisdom of Torah and use it in their daily lives in a practical and effective way. And that's what we're going to learn about. And what I did, because I find reading through the Book of Mishle is a big challenge, because it's kind of a hodgepodge. It jumps from topic to topic. And some of the topics are repeated throughout the book in different ways. And so what I did for tonight, to illustrate that to you, is I took 3 different themes that appear in the Book of Mishle. And what's a lot of fun about looking at the Book of Mishle is that each one of these proverbs offers us, it's kind of a riddle, it's kind of a puzzle, that we have to figure out what is Shlomo HaMelech trying to teach us that we don't already know. Sometimes the proverbs seem deceptively simple, and you wonder, what is new here? And that's what we're going to try to crack the code of Mishle, and that's what makes it so much of an adventure to go into. And then to ask ourselves, okay, how can I use this? What advice is Shlomo HaMelech giving me? He's not just telling me an observation about the world, he's giving me advice here. Okay? Now, one of the one of the first things he speaks about, of course, since he calls the Book of Mishle a book of Musar. Musar, yes. Absolutely.
Shlomo's life was kind of like up and down. So do you know at what point in his life he wrote this book?
So according to, there were different perspectives on, there are different opinions about which book he wrote first, and which book he wrote second, and which book he wrote last. It seems like, according to most of the Mefarshim, he wrote this at his heyday, during the best of times. You know, it's tempting to think, like the way that the Chazal say, the way that the rabbis say, is that Shaare Rahamim he wrote when he was very young because it's romantic and it's very passionate, and he was romantic and passionate back then. And then at the middle of his life, he became very wise and a little bit more a little bit more cerebral. So he wrote the Book of Mishle. And then at the end of his life, after all his frustrations, he wrote the Book of Kohelet, where he complains about everything. That's the way that the Chazal, that's the way that the rabbis present his development. There are some Mefarshim who say, no, the opposite. In the beginning, in Kohelet, he was trying to seek out what is the best way of life. And so he said, maybe it's going after this, maybe it's going after that. And he rejected all of those possibilities and said, no, it's about going after Chokhmah. That's what Mishle is. That becoming wise is the best path. But Shaare Shirim, Song of Songs, is the love of Hashem, which is an even higher level than the Book of Mishle. So some flip it around and say maybe it went the opposite direction. So we don't know exactly. But what everybody seems to agree on is that Mishle was somewhere in the middle. Right? Somewhere in the middle of his career is where he wrote Mishle. And it does say in the Book of Melachim that he wrote thousands of Mishalim. We don't have thousands of Pesukim in the Book of Mishle, so there were many of them that didn't end up becoming included in the final edit. But he wrote many, many songs, and of all those songs, all we know is Shaare Shirim, which, by the way, Shaare Shirim, there are many interpretations of what the title Shaare Shirim means. Shaare Shirim could mean a song made of many songs. But when I taught children in my synagogue Shaare Shirim, I told them what Shaare Shirim means is the best song ever. Shaare Shirim. It is the song of songs. It's the ultimate song, because that was the only one that really came down to us, to posterity. But in any case, Mishle, one of the issues in Mishle, one of the refrains, one of the topics, is rebuke, because Mishle a lot of times is telling you, don't do the stupid thing that you're doing now. Wise up. And many times we see ourselves in the Mishle, because we say, oh yeah, I do that kind of thing all the time, and he's telling me it's not good. Why is it not good? And he gives us an insight into why it's not good. So the very first proverb I picked, I organized it by themes. These themes are not set in stone. They're not given in Har Sinai. I made them up. You might disagree. You might say, no, that doesn't really belong under that theme. And please tell me if I'm wrong. I may be. The first one is, don't rebuke a letz. A letz is a specific type of nasty person. I'm going to explain in a minute. He says, don't rebuke that type of person, because he's going to hate you if you do. Hochach lechacham v'yehaveka. But if you rebuke a wise person, he's going to love you. Now, I put questions here. These are questions to think about. We don't have to go through every one of the questions. These are questions I thought of when I was reading these Mishalim. Yes?
Don't laugh, but what does rebuke mean?
Rebuke means to criticize somebody. So, for example, when someone forgets to do something, to say, I was counting on you to do that and you didn't come through for me, and what's wrong with you? You're not responsible. That's rebuking them. Okay? To rebuke is to criticize somebody. Usually because they did something that you didn't like. Or because, they're living their life in a way that you don't agree with, and you decide to make it what they call an intervention, right? Or you decide to take your friend and tell them that they're going in a bad path and they're going to end up in a lot of trouble, so you sit them down and say, listen, I see you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, your life is going to be ruined, you need to stop. That's a rebuke. It could be done nicely, it could be done not so nicely. But a letz is, in English it says here, do not rebuke the scoffer. What's a scoffer? It's a person. What is to scoff at something or to mock something? It's somebody who mocks things, makes fun of things. Everybody knows the person who thinks they know everything, right? Don't give me a specific example. I don't want Lashon Hara to happen, but we can take people from the outside. Donald Trump is an example of someone. When I think of somebody who you can't tell the man anything, he can never be wrong. He's right about everything. Even when he's wrong, he's also right, in his mind. That's a letz. A letz is somebody that you can. Has everybody experienced a person like that? Of course you have. It's either been a teacher, or it's been a boss, or it's been a relative, somebody that always knows better than you. No matter what you tell them, they know better than you. Okay, and they mock the people who think that they're going to be able to tell them something different. We all know people like that. So if you try to rebuke, if you try to criticize such a person, You're not going to get anywhere with doing that because the person thinks that they know better than everybody. So what's the point of trying to get to them, right? Whereas a wise person, if you go to the wise person and say, excuse me, I noticed that you're smoking cigarettes. Those are very unhealthy. You should quit smoking. The wise person might say, you know what, I didn't know. Can I see the research on that? Let me find out. And he educates, or she educates herself and realizes it's a bad habit and it's very unhealthy and quits. Whereas the person who's a letz will mock you and say, who do you think you are? Oh, you're following the fads of the day. That's just what they say today. But tomorrow they're going to say something different. You don't know what you're talking about. And I've been doing this my whole life. And my grandfather smoked like a chimney and he lived to be 150 years old. Everyone's met people like that, right? Okay. So that's what Mishle is saying. So the question is, why will the person who is a scoffer hate you for rebuking them? Because I would have said, okay, I won't listen to you. If I'm somebody who's arrogant and I think I know everything, and I don't listen to advice or reason from anybody because I think I know everything. As one of my teachers once said, he said when I was in high school, he had a line. He would say, "I thought I made a mistake once, but I was wrong." That kind of attitude. So that type of attitude is the letz. He thinks he can never be wrong. You can't reach that type of person. But why is he going to hate you is the question. And why will the wise person love you? The wise person, if you give the wise person advice, she could take the advice and apply it to her life, but why is she going to love you because of that? Maybe she's just going to say thank you very much and move on. Yes?
Isn't the advice though about like your approach and not about if the other person is wise or the less? Yeah.
What do you mean by your approach?
Like your approach to the advice, like if you know someone isn't going to take it well and is a scoffer or whatever, shouldn't you have like a different approach to the advice?
Well, yeah. Here it's saying you shouldn't bother at all. If
That's
you know that, right, you shouldn't bother at all.
Shouldn't you bother?
You think you should bother?
I think if you have the right approach, you know.
Okay. What does everybody else think about that? Are there any people that you just can't, there's just no way to reach them? Sometimes there might be.
What do you mean there are certain things that you can't say to a person?
Right.
In life, if you want to get something done, there's always a way to do it. But I think when it comes to people, not every person can handle everything no matter in what form you say it.
That's true. There are some people I think that they're not reachable, at least on certain things. At least on certain things. Especially people like this. But why is the person going to hate you? So I think that there's a great insight here. Shlomo HaMelech doesn't just throw words at us and say, oh, he's going to hate you, he's going to love you. There's really an idea here, which is that you have to understand the psychology of, there's a lot of psychology in Mishle. You have to understand the psychology of a person who is a letz, a scoffing person, versus the psychology of a person who's chacham. Because a person who has a big ego, what's most important to that person is their image of being superior to everybody else. That's what the person who puts everyone else down and doesn't want to hear anything from anyone, that person has a big ego and sees him or herself as superior to everyone else. When you point out an error in that person's lifestyle or choices, it's not just giving them information. You're attacking their very identity. You're saying I'm not better than everybody else. It's not perceived as just giving them some information to use. It's being perceived as an attack on their very being. You're suggesting, by even trying to tell me anything that I'm doing wrong, you're suggesting I'm not perfect. I can't handle that. And therefore I'm going to hate you. I'm going to avoid you. I'm never going to talk to you again. You're my enemy. You're my sworn enemy because you're taking away from me what's most important. If you're a letz, if you're a scoffing person, you're an arrogant person, you're a person for whom your image of being superior to everyone else is at the core of your being. Anybody who challenges that is public enemy number one. You don't want anything to do with that person. Whereas a chacham, a wise person, for the wise person, what's most important is not the appearance that they know everything, for a truly wise person, or the appearance that they're superior to everybody else. What is most important to a wise person? What do they want? They want to learn. And ultimately, what is the thing that they're after? What is a wise person after? What are they seeking after? It's not fame, fortune, recognition, people loving them. What is it? What? Growth, definitely. And certainly rebuking or correcting somebody is a way to help them to grow, right?
be the highest potential, like reach their highest level.
They want to reach their highest level, not just for other people to think they're great, but to actually be great. Right? They want true growth. They don't want just the image. People who don't want to change, it's because they already have an image of themselves that I can't be any better than this. I'm already perfect. How can you improve on perfection? But for the wise person, he or she is seeking true growth. True growth means, you know what? I'm going to have to let go of some of my sense that I'm already perfect. Otherwise, there's no way I can grow because perfection can't get any better. And that's why the wise person will love you if you correct them. Because they want to be at the best they can be. Like, for example, I'm not suggesting that I'm a wise person, but I'm just using an example from my life. I'm a Torah reader for 22 years. The Torah every Shabbat. And because I've been reading for 22 years, I rarely will make a mistake. But if somebody points out a mistake that I've been making for the past 22 years without even realizing it, some nuance, some minor mistake that I might be making that I've just become habituated to over the years, I'm very thankful because I want to be the best that I can be in something that that I try to always refine and try to be better. If somebody gives you a tip in something that you're proud of, let's say whatever you might pride yourself on, or you might excel at, and that tip actually helps you to become better, that's great. You should love that. You should want that person around more so they can give you more feedback into how to be better. You should, and that's what it means. The wise person will love the correction. Because the more correction you get, the better you'll actually be. Whereas the person who's a letz, he's only interested, or she's only interested in the perception that I'm perfect. Right? My own feeling that I'm perfect. You're taking away my feeling that I'm perfect. I don't want to deal with you. But for a person who really wants to strive for perfection, telling me I'm wrong is going to help me. So you're my best friend if you're telling me I'm wrong. Because if I have a bunch of yes men around me all the time, I'm not going to grow. And that's the most important thing, yes?
But isn't that like part of human nature, always thinking you're right and wanting to be right? I think that's a lot. Most people don't like to be wrong.
For sure. And everything in the Book of Mishle is trying to teach us what we should look out for in ourselves. We all have a part of it.
I mean, like, I don't like to be wrong, but I don't call myself a scoffer.
Right, no. So everybody has a little bit of every bad trait in them. I think that we all... there are certain things you might be willing to hear feedback on, and there might be other things where you're like, in that area, I don't want to hear anything negative about myself because I can't handle it. Okay? So the people, we're all like that. Everybody has the areas that they're very defensive, but there are some people who are totally defensive, okay? That's the extreme in Mishle. That's the extreme of the person who can't hear anything that they did wrong. For most of us, it depends. If somebody says something to you that really rips out the core of who you are and makes you feel horrible, nobody wants to hear that. But maybe what Mishle is saying is, you know what? Even that, you should listen. Even that, a wise person would say, is there any grain of truth in that? Because sometimes, listen, we all have people out there who love us, and we all have people out there who are not our biggest fan, right? And the people who are not your biggest fan will sometimes say horrible, exaggerated, bad things about you or to you, right? It could happen. Now, all those horrible, terrible things that they might say about you, once in a while, underneath is actually something true. They blow it out of proportion and make you sound like a monster, but really there's something small. There's some small kernel of truth. And you know what? You can take that small kernel of truth that might be in there and say, you know what? That person's a loser because they have no life. They're busy criticizing me. But you know what? I can take what's in their words to make myself a better person. They pointed something out about me that's really, that it's not as bad as they think it is or they portray it. But you know what? There's something true about that. I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to own that. I'm going to learn from that. And I think that's what Mishle is saying, that even the people who come and criticize you, you shouldn't fear the criticism. It's human nature to do it. Of course, nobody wants to not feel good about themselves. Nobody does. But one way to feel good about yourself is to say, you know what? When somebody criticizes me, instead of saying, I don't want to hear it, and that person's horrible, and I hate them, and I never want to see them again, and I'm unfriending them on Facebook, and I'm blocking them on whatever, instead, you could listen to what they say, discount the parts that are exaggerated, of course, and say, is there anything true in what they're saying? They pointed out that, I'm not friendly, I wasn't friendly, or I wasn't as warm as I could be, or I wasn't as this, or I wasn't that. Was there any truth to it? Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I remember one time, I'm using my own example. Somebody sat down with me, and it wasn't to criticize me, but they said, I'm going to be honest with you because you're a person who really wants, I think really would be receptive. And they told me critiques about myself. And one of the critiques was in the way I interacted with people. They said, and this was a while ago, so I fixed it. Of course, I'm perfect now, but I wasn't perfect then. And they said, when I first met you, I noticed this about you, and that can sometimes be off-putting. And pointed out some other things. And you know what? Not that I'm the greatest person ever, but it was presented in a nice way. It was presented in a constructive way. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I can really see what he's saying. It hurts to realize that you weren't being, you weren't perfect. But after I got over the initial feeling of not being perfect, I said, you know what? It's something to think about. I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to see if I can use that. So it's hard to do, but if it were easy to do, he wouldn't have to write a book on it. That's why he had to write a book on it. And it's very true. That's the next piece here. It says, Lo yehav letocheach lo. That's an understatement. The scoffer doesn't like when you criticize him. That's certainly true. El chachamim lo yelech. Therefore, he doesn't go to the wise people. Of course, he doesn't go to the wise people. Well, so what is Shlomo HaMelech trying to tell us? Of course, he doesn't go to the wise people. He doesn't want to be criticized. So why would he? What is he trying to say? What would he go to the wise people for? What would the scoffing person go to the wise people for? And what is Shlomo HaMelech trying to tell us would be the problem, or what he should do? Because anything he says about the scoffer is what you shouldn't do, obviously, right? He's saying this person is arrogant. He doesn't go to the wise people. What is he going to get from the wise people? He's not going to listen to them anyway. So what is Shlomo HaMelech trying to add here? These are not, by the way, right after one another in the Book of Mishle. I actually went through the book and plucked out different proverbs that are on similar themes. So I think what he's talking about, and this is speculation on my part, but I believe what he's trying to say is that a scoffing person loses out not just because he doesn't like to be criticized, which goes without saying. He's not going to hang around people who live a lifestyle that makes him feel less. Okay? He doesn't want to hang out with those people. Because when you hang out with the people who are wise people, and you are not a wise person, it makes you feel less. Do you know anybody from the Torah that you could think of who was like that? There's a famous character in the Torah who changed his residence because he didn't want to be in the presence of someone who would make him feel inferior. Changed where he lived. Does anybody know who it was? Lot. That is correct. Lot did not want to be with Abraham. Where did he want to be? He wanted to be in Sodom. Now I'm not saying it. Lot.
Think of it in that way.
Lot is not as terrible as what's being described in Mishle. Don't get me wrong. But Lot is an example of someone who, when Sodom gets destroyed, where does Lot go? What would be the most logical thing? You just lived in a town that got destroyed by divine intervention. Sulfur and brimstone start falling from the sky. Your entire town is completely destroyed. Your home is destroyed. Your family, God forbid, all these terrible things happen. Who are you going to run to? Who lives right down the block? Who are you going to run to? You would think he would run right to his uncle, right? His uncle lives right in the neighborhood. His uncle is now famous. Everybody knows where Abraham is. Everybody knows who Abraham is. He's easy to find. He lives right out there with the open tent. He could have gone back and said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I looked at these people of Sodom. It was a big error. I'm glad to be home. Instead, he goes and lives in a cave. That's a strange choice. And the Chachamim say, the rabbis say, the reason he did that was because he didn't want to live in the presence of Abraham. Because when a person is comfortable with their lifestyle, sometimes it can be hard to be around people who make them feel less than they are. But that's the wrong way to look at things. We should want to be around people who make us feel like we're challenged. That's what Mishle is saying. You should try to associate with people who are going to challenge you because they bring out the best in you. If you only hang out with people who think the same way you do, or you only hang out with people who are less than you, then you're not going to grow. Because you're not going to be around the people who can lift you up. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. In other words, it's the same thing again. What Mishle, what Shlomo HaMelech is telling you is don't get too caught up in your own image, your own feeling that I'm perfect. And therefore, I don't want to be around anyone who makes me feel less than perfect. Don't get involved in that. Hang out with people who make you feel less than perfect. It will bring you higher. Listen to people who tell you you're less than perfect. They might sometimes be wrong. That doesn't mean every criticism anybody says of you, I'm saying it's right. It could be totally off base. It could be 0.0001% correct. But even that 0.0001 could be valuable. Yes?
Question. What is your opinion on how, do you think that every person can go to their highest potential, or do you think that there are people who can't get there? They'll just stay at a certain level?
And they'll never be able to grow?
Not grow at all, but grow to their highest potential, like over the years of their life.
Well, I think by definition, if in you is a great potential, that means it's potential. It could be actualized. But certain people have greater challenges in their way and greater obstacles in their way than other people. Everybody has obstacles and challenges. For nobody is it easy to achieve their full potential. There's no such person. In fact, I talked about that last night between Mincha and Arvit, that it says, if a person tells you, Lo yagati o matzati, al ta'amin. If a person says, I didn't work hard, but I achieved great spiritual heights in learning Torah, don't believe them. So I asked a question, but what about prodigies who are geniuses, and when they're 3 years old, they already know the entire Torah, all the stories? Or you see, even in the music and art, sometimes you'll see a kid is 4 years old and playing Mozart and all that, and they end up getting on all the talk shows, and they're really popular. What about that? That looks like it came easy. So the answer is that in order to grow to your potential, there are always going to be challenges. For that person, for that prodigy, he starts out at a level that relative to us is very high. But imagine what that child's actual potential is. Okay? It's thousands of times that. It's off the charts of what we can imagine. So for that person, their greatest challenge might be that they're so good at a young age that they're not going to be pushed to any greater heights because people are going to say they've already topped out. Or they're going to be satisfied with what they are. There's the saying, in the world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Have you ever heard that before? In other words, if everyone's blind around you, then having one eye makes you the best thing ever. In a normal situation, having only one eye is a disadvantage. Everyone else has two. But when you're in the land of the blind, having one eye makes you the king. So it's all, people look at it relatively, but if you look at it in yourself, what's my potential? Not everybody necessarily has the same potential, but Hashem gave everyone the tools and challenges that are going to make that journey, they have to choose to go on the journey, but are going to make that journey fulfilling. And in fact, much of what Mishle talks about is another character called the Atzel, that we're not going to get to tonight, which is the lazy person. The lazy person has lots of potential, but he sits in bed all day, or he waits for things to come to him. And because he sits in bed or waits for things to come to him, it says that the lazy person puts his fork in food, but he's too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. Right? That's one of the things it says in Mishle. Meaning to say that sometimes we'll even start a process, but then in the middle we decide to drop it. We get really, really excited about something, and we take it halfway. It's like they used to say the story about the foolish person who wanted to swim across 500 miles, the 500 miles of ocean. So he swam 250 miles and he got tired, so he came back. So in the end, he did the same, right? 500. He didn't go all the way though, and that's the same idea. Sometimes a person will get really, really excited about something and then they'll drop it in the middle. So we shouldn't be like that. We should really try to overcome that natural tendency to say, you know what, I've done what I need to do. I'm up to my potential now. Well, I might only be 20 years old, but the next 100 years I'm going to stay at this level. We shouldn't do that. We can always be growing. So I'm going to jump down to the next theme because I want to make sure that we get through everything. Okay? These next ones are great because they have to do with relationships. Okay? And relationships is something that are among the most fascinating aspects of human life. We all know. And everyone's interested in relationships, and all television shows are about relationships, and all movies are about relationships, and all songs are about relationships. If any of you have TVs or watch movies or listen to music, which I'm sure you don't. But the next topic is love and forgiveness. Okay? So let's take a look at at these two proverbs. And in fact, I want to start with the second one first. Let's look at the second one first. Mechase pesha, mevakesh ahava. The person who covers up sin seeks love. V'shoneh v'davar, mafrid aluf. But somebody who harps on something will separate or alienate his friend. Now, Mishle is written mostly addressing men, so that's why we don't have to think about it as men because we're a women's class, but it's the same idea. Okay? So what's mechase pesha? Here it's talking not about a sin between the person and Hashem. It's talking about a sin. In other words, somebody does something to you that you don't like. Somebody hurts your feelings or they harm you in some way. So mechase pesha means you cover up for that. You cover up for it. Whereas shoneh v'davar, it's like from the word vishinantam levanecha that we say in the Shema. Vishinantam means to repeat something. Shoneh v'davar, he repeats something all the time. We all know people, right, who cannot stop reminding us of something that we did to them that they didn't like. Okay? So a lot of times parents are really good at that. Right? They never forget. They never forget. And I'll tell you that, I was like, one of my other side careers is as a relationships counselor for married couples and for engaged couples and for couples in general. And one of the biggest issues is, first of all, being able to restrain or refrain from criticizing and harping on each other. People do it all the time. They're criticizing each other. And usually men complain about women harping all the time, right? That's what you usually hear. It's not necessarily true. Women have plenty of their own complaints about the men. They don't listen to begin with. But that's often a communication gap between men and women. That the women are perceived as constantly complaining either about the same things or about different things. That's what married men, they have all these jokes about married men always. They always complain about their wives constantly harping on things. So what Mishle is talking about here is not necessarily in a marital situation, but even among friends. But let's look at exactly what he says, so we can get an idea of what he's trying to tell you. Because we all know that. We all know that it's annoying when people harp on things, whatever they are. So, mechase pesha. If a person covers up. It's interesting, the language. He covers up. A person covers up the sin, meaning the sin that another person did to them. Let's say they hurt you, they forgot your birthday, they insulted you, they didn't invite you to their party, whatever it was. If you cover that up, mevakesh ahava, you're seeking love. But if you harp on something, you alienate them. So that seems like, okay, so so everybody knows that. I mean, nobody likes somebody who harps on things, right? But let's look at it at a deeper level. Yeah.
What is he talking about? Is he saying you're covering up somebody else's sin? Or
Something someone did to you.
Like you're covering up the fact that they sinned
towards you.
Or the fact that you sinned towards them?
The fact that they sin towards you. In other words, you are forgiving, basically. You're letting it go, or you're covering it up, meaning, okay, it's like, when you, well, actually, I don't want to give this example yet. I'll hold on to that example for a second. When a person offends you or hurts your feelings, or they do something wrong, which happens all the time, maybe, very regularly, so you have two options. You can either focus on that all the time and always bring it up, and always complain about it and say, you always do this, and you always did that, and remember how you did that, and remember how you did that, and remember how you did that, and you always bring it up. Or you can just say, you know what? It's water under the bridge. That's a proverb of English. It's water under the bridge. It's over. I'm going to let it go. So what is Shlomo HaMelech trying to teach us about this, though? Because he says, the person who is willing to cover up the other person's sin is mevakesh ahava. He wants, or she wants, love. She wants love to prevail. The person who's harping on something, who's constantly going back to it, is alienating. But why is that? I want to just understand, what is the person, what insight is he giving us into the person who doesn't want to, or who wants to forgive, who's quick to forgive, who covers up for what the other person did? Meaning that they'll make excuses for them, right? Right? In the extreme case, which never should happen to anybody, but in the extreme case, in abusive relationships, the victim of the abuse will make all kinds of excuses for why their spouse, they must have had a bad day, they must have been drinking too much, or they must have this, they must have that. Come up with all kinds of excuses. Okay? That's to an extreme. But in an ordinary case, we come up with ways to cover over the things that people have done to us. What does it show about the person when they do that? What kind of person will do that?
Insecure. Insecure.
Definitely in the case of an abuse victim, insecure. Yes, that is true. But let's say in an ordinary case.
So they're weak. Weak.
You would consider it weak because they're just letting everything go that the other person does, you mean? That's true. It could be seen that way, especially if the things that are done, it depends on the situation, what they've done, right? It depends how significant it is, right? If it's really, I would say, certainly in a case of abuse or where the offense that's being done is really a serious one, you're right. That would be a sign of weakness if they're always rationalizing it. But in more ordinary cases, it might not be. Yes?
I can understand what she's saying, but I think, like in general, I think it takes a very nice person to kind of, like, not, like, take what you do to them, that you've hurt them, like, to not make you feel bad about what you did.
Right.
I feel like it takes a very special person to kind of just...
To rise above it.
So it's more
Yes,
of a
to let
selfless
everything...
person.
It's more of a selfless person, I would say. Yes?
But some people do it to protect their own ego. Like, no, they didn't say that.
Right, they couldn't have said that to me because they must love me because I'm so wonderful.
They meant it because they're ever...
How could they ever say that? Right, so in the end, what Shlomo Melech is saying is mivakesh ahava. The person is more concerned about keeping the relationship. Right? They want the love to continue. In other words, either mutually or at least in one direction. They want the love to continue. So they've decided that relationship is more important than their personal slight. Yes?
What if you don't believe that the relationship is worth the offense? Like, what if the person who hurt you, like, you realize that you're probably better off not being involved in that friendship or that relationship, and that, like, you can only take so much? Is it wrong to just, I'm not saying to always bring it up and to keep up your relationship and always, like, go back to that moment, but to just kind of end the relationship?
Sometimes you have to do that, of course. No, I mean, sometimes you have to do that. There's no question. I mean, even married couples, sometimes they have to do that. And certainly with friends, sometimes you have to do that. I mean, you can't be foolish if it's harming you.
Not even that, I think you're constantly forgiving. It gives the other person the sense that
they're not doing anything wrong. Right. I mean, especially if they're the type of person that can't take correction and there's no way to reach out to them and to fix the situation because they are stuck in the way that they are. You're right. Every situation is different. Absolutely. Every situation is different, especially when it comes to relationships. Every relationship dynamic is different. Absolutely. I agree. You're right. But what I wanted to say about the end of the pasuk, V'shoneh v'davar mafrid aluf, why does it bother us so much when people harp on things? Did you ever think about that? Why does it bother us so much? People constantly go back to the same thing. Or they constantly complain about the same thing about us all the time. They constantly criticize the same thing all the time.
You feel like underappreciated. You feel like they when they look at you, they look at your flaws. They don't, like, they're not reminded of all the good that you've done.
They don't appreciate you. That's absolutely right. What else?
You're not.
The criticizer,
Yeah.
the critic is not changing?
Yeah. But,
Yeah, what did you want to say?
No, you can go.
no.
I mean, like, I think somebody has to really love you to tell you the real truth and the whole truth.
But if they harp on it all the time, the same thing every single time, after a while, it gets old.
It's like
But maybe you need to hear that. Like, maybe you need to correct something.
you need to keep on hearing.
I
them,
think
like,
keeping hearing the
let's-
same thing again and again is probably, it's like, the way that I understand it, why it's alienating is because a person who says the same thing again and again is only talking about themselves.
Yeah, it's
You
like-
understand? They're only really focused about themselves. They're whining. They're really whining to you. Because if they could have corrected it the first time, the second time, and it was something, then they would have tried a different way of trying to solve the problem, or they would have suggested something, or been constructive, or it wouldn't be the same thing again and again. When somebody is repeating the same thing again and again, after a while, it makes you feel all they're focused on is their own needs, their own thing. They're not even seeing me anymore. because they're not really engaging me. They're just harping on the same thing again. I don't want anything to do with them anymore. That's why it's alienating to us, because the person who harps on something all the time is really just living in their own world. Whereas the person who's willing to put water under the bridge, where it's warranted, of course, where it's not a serious, terrible offense, where it's worth rising above it, then that person is putting the relationship between the two individuals over their own personal obsession with that thing. They're obsessed with something that bothers them, and they keep coming back to it again and again and again. It's their own thing after a while. It's not really about you anymore. Okay, it's not really about you, because if it were really about you and they were trying to help you correct it, they wouldn't be just harping on it all the time. They would try to find a way to help you. Or they would let it go. But the fact that they can't let it go or find a way to help you means that it's just something coming from themselves. It's a self-centered type of a whining. And that's why it alienates. That's why it's a beautiful way that he says, it separates between the two of you, meaning you're not really engaging anymore when the person just keeps going back again and again and again to the same thing, just repeating the same thing. So I think that's there is one more example here. Sinat te'orer medanim. Okay, which is on the same topic of relationships. It says, when you hate somebody, it raises problems. It causes arguments. When you don't like the person. Ve'al kol pesha'im techaseh ahava. But love can cover over every sin. Okay? When you're in love with that guy, that happens to you or happened, you can't do anything wrong. Everything you did is perfect. In the beginning. After a while, it wears off, In the beginning, you're enchanted. You can't see anything that could be possibly a flaw in that person. And every movie, every storybook romance is like that, right? The person's just perfect. They're just idyllic. There's nothing to criticize. And even when there's signs that there might be something wrong, what always happens? You brush them aside. Al kol pesha'im techaseh ahava. You can't see anything wrong. It's like, who is like this? This is like a mother's love, right? Did you ever hear the joke about how do you know that Jesus was Jewish? Because he was 30 years old, still lived at home, and his mother thought he was God. And that's one of the things about parents. They tend to see their children in they can't hear any criticism about their children, or it's very hard for them to hear criticism about their children. They tend to perceive them only in the positive. That's an example of that is, of course, Yitzchak and Esav. Yitzchak didn't see whatever bad qualities Esav had, because the love that he had for him didn't allow him to see it. Whereas when you don't like somebody, they could be really great, but you won't see that either. You know why he did that nice thing? Only because he's really a jerk. I'll figure out why. He must have another motivation. There must be another intention behind it, because that person is no good, rotten, and anything he does or she does, even if it seems like it's very friendly, there has to be something behind it. There's a scheme behind it. She's not trustworthy. She's not a good person, and therefore, I know that everything that she does, I'm going to see through that same lens. But what's the advice here that Mishle is giving us? There's good advice here. Goes both ways. It's not easy to do, but what is really Mishle trying to tell us to do? Try to separate out your subjective emotions, right, from your judgment of people, and see them for who they actually are. And it's not always easy to do that. For example, someone who's a Republican, okay? I'm using that for a reason because I'm assuming, okay? There is nothing a Democratic politician can do that's good. No matter what they do, it's bad. So, for some reason, okay? Even if it seems great, it seems like exactly what the Republican would do. They have to find a way that it's wrong. And the same on the other side. I mean, I know people, of course they're usually Ashkenazi Jews, who they have never met a liberal politician they didn't like. Right? There's no such thing. They love any Democrat that's running, they love them. It doesn't matter what. They could be communists. Okay? It doesn't matter. And I'm not exaggerating either. I know people like that. Now, I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just using an example. Okay, when we look, especially these political pundits, they look at a person who's on the other side. Listen to Rush Limbaugh or whoever. No matter what there is literally nothing they can do right ever. There's nothing they can do right, and vice versa. There's nothing the other side can do wrong. There's nothing that the side that they like, they'll always find an explanation for why what they did was great. And the side that they don't like, they'll always find the reason why what they did, no matter how wonderful it seems, was wrong. And that's the way we all are. And it's very difficult, for people who are, let's say, a judge in courts. A lot of times, they decide in the beginning, just like we all do, a lot of times first impressions, we decide, am I going to like this person or not? And we start filtering everything through that from like the first 5 minutes. Okay? Like when you came tonight, you said, am I going to like this rabbi who's talking or not? And some of you might have decided yes and some no. So some of you are thinking everything I say, this is garbage, I'm never coming back here again, and I'm going to complain to everybody afterward that they brought this guy, and other ones might be saying something nicer than that. But, in your mind, from the beginning, you made the decision towards the beginning of how you felt. That's human nature. Have you ever seen Judge Judy? Okay? Judge Judy is a good example of somebody who is totally not objective, From the minute that those two people stand up there, she decides in the first 5 minutes which one she likes and which one she hates. Sometimes she hates both of them. But she decides, and they can't say anything. Even if it makes sense, she doesn't have any patience to hear it because she's already decided that they're no good. And we're all like that. So what Mishle is saying is try to parse out, okay, you might love this person, and you know what? There might be very good reasons you love this person. But there's nobody perfect. So that person, there's got to be things that he does or she does that are not so great. And even a rotten person, or a person that you personally don't like, there might be things, possibly, that they do that have a redeeming quality to them that you would be able to see. It's so hard for us to separate that out. It's so hard for us to say about somebody that we don't like anything positive. It's so hard for us to say about somebody that we like something negative because we really want to be able to see things in black and white. Okay, in black and white. That's the way that we are. And what Mishle is saying is, you know what? Take each person. And that's why I always said I'm not part of any political party because I want to look at first of all, they're all bad. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 9 years. Okay? They're all corrupt and equally. Okay? But you have to look at the individuals. And on individual level or individual actions, individual policies, you have to be able to separate out and take a look and see. There might be some of them that might sometimes, on a rare occasion, do something good. On both sides. So we have to be open to that possibility, even among the people that we don't trust and we don't like, as hard as it is. And that makes us better people because you have to be more nuanced and deeper to be able to do that. And it's much more comfortable to say there are the good guys, those are my friends and the people I like, and everything that they do is untouchable and perfect. And then there are the bad guys, and those are the people that I don't like, and everything that they do is horrible no matter what. Even when they give a nice donation to tzedakah, it was just to show off. Why did they help that person? Just because they always want to feel like they're helping, so they feel important. Why do they invite people over to the house for Shabbat? Just so that they can tell everyone what a great host they are. That's why. You can find negative spin on anything if you try hard. Sometimes it's not even that hard. And sometimes it might be true. But we shouldn't fall back on our bias to judge people's actions. And that's important for us to train ourselves to try to see, try to find the positive even in a person we don't like so much. Or try to find, to be honest with ourselves about the people that we do like. And be able to, and that can also help them. Because if you flatter a person that they're perfect all the time, as many people do with their children, tell them they're perfect all the time, they're not going to grow from that, from being told that they're perfect every single day. They need to sometimes be nudged a little bit in a better direction. Are you telling me time, or are you just coming to join with the ladies? Okay. Well, okay. So.
How long does it take?
Okay, so I think that this is fine. We accomplished something. Did anybody feel like they learned anything? Okay, good. So I didn't waste your time. I will save then the second sheets for next week, and we'll add another sheet so that we'll have another 2 topics to do. And I think that we got something out of this. You see how these proverbs really make you think, and they really make you look at life differently. And there's so many of them, and I do again want to encourage everybody to submit suggestions of topics that you'd like to do, because I'm totally open to doing what, this is not for me to stand up here and talk about whatever I'm interested in, which would probably be nap time for you guys, you know. I don't want to bore you. I want to talk about what you guys are interested in learning about. So please give us feedback and suggestions about what you'd like to learn so we can structure the program to make it exciting for you and interesting for you. And of course, not every single thing is going to be as equally interesting to everyone, but I'll do my best and my absolute best to make it as interesting to everyone as possible so we can all stay together and continue learning all the different topics together, okay?
Thank you.
Deal?
so much.
Thank you.